April the 14th, 2026. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Two Witnesses Live. I'm your host, Watchful. Let's start with the top story that's dominating the world right now, the Middle East and the Iran situation. The U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports is now fully in effect. It started yesterday, Monday, at about 10 a.m. Eastern Time. U.S. Central Command reports that in the first 24 hours, no ships have left or entered Iranian ports through the blockade. President Trump said Iran misjudged its leverage. He warned that any Iranian fast attack ships approaching U.S. vessels will be immediately eliminated. He called Iran's past control over the Strait of Hormuz nothing more than blackmail. Now, some commercial ships, including a few Iran-linked tankers, are still moving through the broader Strait of Hormuz itself, but the blockade specifically targets trafficked in and out of the Iranian ports. There's a real cat-and-mouse game playing out right now. On the diplomatic side, talks continue. The U.S. and Iran are still considering a possible second round of negotiations, maybe as soon as this week, to extend the ceasefire and deal with Iran's nuclear program. Iran has offered a 5-year suspension of uranium enrichment. The U.S. is pushing for a much longer commitment. Saudi Arabia is urging the United States to ease or even drop the blockade. They're worried Iran could retaliate by disrupting other shipping lanes like the Red Sea. This remains the biggest global story today, and oil prices are reacting accordingly. Switching over to domestic news, 2 members of Congress are stepping down amid serious allegations. First, Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell of California announced he will... What is it with California? A lot of corruption there. Announced he will resign from Congress following multiple accusations of sexual misconduct and assault. The House Ethics Committee had opened an investigation into the matter. This resignation is also shaking up the race for California governor. In a separate case, Republican Representative Tony Gonzalez of Texas is also resigning amid his own misconduct allegations. Both departures come as the House was preparing possible expulsion votes. Interesting. On the international front, big changes overseas. In Hungary, Peter Magyar and his Tisza party scored a landslide victory in parliamentarian elections this past weekend. Viktor Orban conceded defeat, ending his 16 years in power. That's a major shift for the country. In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberals have now secured a major government. They got there through recent by-election wins and some floor crossings from other parties. So let's move on to the economy and inflation. The Producer Price Index for March was released today. Wholesale prices rose sharply month over month, driven largely by energy costs. This comes on the heels of last week's consumer price data and shows continued cost pressures moving through the system. On the housing side, existing home sales fell in March to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 3.98 million units. That's the slowest pace in 9 months. It's a slow start to the usual spring buying season, even with more homes on the market and slightly lower mortgage rates. Finally, a quick look at today's schedule. Vice President J.D. Vance is speaking this evening at Turning Point USA, at a Turning Point USA event at Atkins Ford Arena in Athens, Georgia, part of the Classic Center at the University of Georgia. Doors opened at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and the program began at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It's aimed at reaching younger voters ahead of the midterms. Congress is actually in session today, working on FY 2026, fiscal year 2026 appropriations and other legislation. That's the latest as we head into this evening. We'll keep watching these stories closely, especially developments in the Strait of Hormuz, as China seems to be pushing the envelope there. Thank you for joining us here at the Two Witnesses Live. I'm Watchful. Stay vigilant. And let's get into our daily Torment report.
Through trials faced, through testing days, you've kept my word, walked in my ways. Though strength was small, you held your ground. The door I've opened cannot be bound. They turned away, they closed their eyes, but I have written what none denies. Through fleeting fear and fleeting shame, you stood for truth, upheld my name. Hold fast, your crown is sure. The door I've opened will stand secure. A pillar raised in the temple of my God, forever sealed, forever strong.
All right, kicking it off with Donald Trump. Looking at his post today. So this was posted 2 hours ago. Let's see. This was put out by the Cato Institute, who hates Trump, but they can't hide the facts. The Democrats were a disaster on the border, and we were the best in the history of the USA. President Donald J. Trump. Legal entries by asylum seekers at U.S.-Mexico legal entry point are down 99.9%. Yep. Look at that. That shows that is intentional invasion right there. That is an intentional invasion under the Biden administration. So you've got Trump administration, Biden administration. Look at that. You got the asylum seekers. Boy, they were just bringing them in by the busload. And then Trump, boom. Wow. Well, transition is on the horizon, that's for sure. All right, so this is an endorsement. Yeah, we don't need to read it. No endorsements. There's another one, another endorsement. Oh, yep, it's an endorsement day. So many endorsements. Great honor to endorse America First. Is this all we got today? Endorsements? Come on, give us something good. Mike Johnson, let's see. I am working very hard with our great speaker. This looks like not an endorsement. All right. I'm working very hard with our great speaker, Mike Johnson, along with Chairman Jim Jordan and Chairman Rick Crawford, to get a clean extension of FISA 702 through the House of Representatives this week. I am asking Republicans to unify and vote together on the test vote to bring a clean bill to the floor. We need to stick together when the bills come before the House Rules Committee today to keep it clean. I was a victim of the worst and most illegal abuse of FISA in our nation's history by radical left lunatics who lied to the FISA court to spy on my 2016 presidential campaign in their attempt to rig the election in favor of crooked Hillary Clinton. Their use of this instrument in the 2020 presidential election was even worse, when the dirty cop James Comey, the failed head of the FBI, went after me. He was using FISA Title I, the domestic collection, not FISA 702, the foreign collection, which needs to be extended today. While parts of FISA were illegally and unfortunately used against me in the Democrats' disgraceful witch hunt and attack in the Russia hoax, and perhaps would be used against me in the future, I am willing to risk that as a citizen in order to do what is right for our country. Our military desperately needs FISA 702, and it is one of the reasons we had such tremendous success on the battlefield, both in Venezuela and Iran. Since the first day of my already historic second term, my administration has worked tirelessly to ensure these FISA reforms are being aggressively executed at every level of the executive branch to keep America safe, while protecting our sacred civil liberties guaranteed by our great Constitution With the ongoing successful military activities against the terrorist Iranian regime, it is more important than ever that we remain vigilant, protect our homeland, troops, and diplomats stationed abroad, and maintain our ability to quickly stop bad actors seeking to cause harm to our people and our country. The fact is, whether you like FISA or not, it is extremely important to our military. I have spoken to many generals about this, and they consider it vital. Not one said, even tactily, that they can do without it, especially right now with our brilliant military operation in Iran. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Okay. Fair enough. Europe is desperate for energy, and yet the United Kingdom refuses to open North Sea oil, one of the greatest fields in the world. Tragic. Aberdeen should be booming. Norway sells its North Sea oil to the UK at double the price. They're making a fortune. UK, which is better situated on the North Sea for purposes of energy than Norway, should drill, baby, drill. It is absolutely crazy that they don't. And no more windmills. President Donald J. Trump. Okie doke. Rep Burchett reveals government giving $40 million per week to the Taliban, and Dems oppose ending it. Bruce Blakeman, the highly respected and very popular Nassau County executive who is running for governor, is surging in New York State polls. He is one of the best politicians in the U.S. Watch him work his magic. Alan Dershowitz, Trump could move to expunge 2019 impeachment after release of the bombshell evidence. Ooh, I thought he might be able to do that. Biden administration weaponizing law to infringe rights of pro-life activists. I'm not reading the articles just because it's really not. If this anything he says on here is considered prophecy, it's not going to be written in an article. So we're just looking for the things that he actually posts. Donald Trump, 1950, 4 years old. Huh. Clearly AI. Oh man, I totally got swept into that. Now YouTube's gonna nail me for copyright. Hang on. hopefully they didn't stop the stream. I gotta go get the stream over here so I can make sure. Are you all still there? YouTube really doesn't like you playing copyrighted music. All right, I think we're okay. I still see you guys. Okay, we're still streaming on YouTube. Are we though? Yep, there we are. All right. Sorry about that. Got to be really careful with when you play music on YouTube. They are very strict about music. We should be good now. Here, we'll turn this off. There you go. That's pretty good AI, though. Going from him as a kid, they probably just gathered together a bunch of his videos and used AI. Obviously, because he's like moving through, stuff and stuff's transitioning. That's crazy. Pretty cool, though. Pretty realistic. All right, 20 hours ago from Mark Thiessen. Last week, Trump's critics were crowing Iran had achieved a strategic victory, leveraging control of the Strait of Hormuz to force him into a ceasefire negotiations. Now Trump has flipped the script, using the ceasefire to seize control of the strait. All right, just like Russia, collusion hoax, the clown sham, show sham, impeachment of President Trump. Oh, this is, we read this yesterday, newly declassified. Wow. Not very much posted today. Not very much at all. I mean, a lot of endorsements. Yeah. I mean, he's pointing out this is a truth. So one of the metrics of the two witnesses is they have to be prophesying for 1,260 days. So we're using a very, very, very liberal definition of the word prophecy in regards to Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Basically, truth. So are they speaking truth on a daily basis? Because that is one form of prophecy, or talking about the future. Most 99.9% of the time, we're just looking for them to speak some kind of truth. And that counts as prophesying for 1,260 days. So, I mean, this counts. He's speaking the truth about the border crisis. I don't think the endorsements count. No. What else? When he's calling people out, that definitely counts. When he's calling out corruption, like the Russia collusion, the hoax, the impeachment stuff, those all count. That does not count, even though it's cute. Reposting this kind of thing. And then he also has a lot of speaking engagements throughout the day. So if he didn't post anything on here, we'd go looking for something that he would have said today. Yeah, but I think that counts, even though it's like this is skating by. I mean, we could go look at the White House. I know JD they had him live earlier at the White House 8 days ago, 10 hours ago. POTUS and FLOTUS welcome Netherlands King and Queen. Tax week, no tax on tips. This was cute. This is where he had DoorDash delivered yesterday to illustrate no tax on tips. That's also where he said that they'd asked him, the media had asked him why he posted the meme of himself representing Jesus. He said that he didn't. Here, let's see if we can find this. That's super cute. So she delivers, he talks to her, and then they come over here.
Yes, very.
And I especially want to thank you for being here.
Well, I want to thank you for the no tax on tips.
Is this not the full?
This amounts
They may have
of
trimmed
money.
it.
And are the White House good tippers? Do you know?
Wait,
Oh, this is a trimmed down version. It's not the full version. Bummer. Oh, yeah, this is just 1 minute. Well, what are you going to do? All right. Well, let's move on to Elon. Yeah, that picture is starting to make the rounds in the news cycle. Even Tucker Carlson is calling Donald Trump the Antichrist, which no surprise there. As people turn against him, that's going to be their go-to. They're gonna call him the Antichrist, not knowing the scriptures. Just because they think that just because he no longer supports them or he called them out, that's one of the unfortunate side effects of speaking truthful things. You don't make friends. All right, Elon Musk, same thing. You know, whenever he's calling out truth, he is definitely a truth teller. See, they are calling for genocide of whites. This was 2 hours ago. This is South Africa. Is this South Africa? Ew. Wow. Unbelievable. Wow. Calls to kill the Boer, kill the farmer are still happening in South Africa, and ignoring the brutal farm attacks is straight up tragic. You think these guys are next? As with many things, the far left chooses to look the other way on these crimes. Yep. Interesting, huh? Elon reposted, let's see, we strictly prohibit users from generating non-consensual explicit deepfakes and from using our tools to undress real people. XAI has extensive safeguards in place to prevent such misuse, such as continuous monitoring of public usage, analysis of evasion attempts in real time, frequent model updates, prompt filters, and additional safeguards. Oh, this is in response to NBC's Musk's Grok AI chatbot is still making sexual deepfakes despite X's promise to stop it. It's not. It really is. We were messing around with this, trying to see how far we could push it. It is extremely aggressive when it comes to generating like video and deep fakes. And Grok is by far, in a way, not the best model for producing video with audio. The video's pretty darn good, but they won't let you produce deep fakes of stuff. And especially sexually explicit stuff. There's definitely very strong filters on that. Go ahead and try. Just try and produce some, not safe for work image on Grok. It won't let you do it. It'll blur it out. Yeah, so I don't know what NBC is talking about. They should probably, provide the prompts that they're using if there's something that's actually working, because we tested that and there's nothing that worked. All right, from Katie Miller, court victory in San Francisco today against OpenAI. Despite OpenAI's own mass casualty flags on his chats, a human intervened, restoring his account, then refused to hand over the logs that could reveal who else is at risk. A San Francisco woman fears for her life. She's asking a judge to cut off her ex's ChatGPT. A lawsuit accuses OpenAI of ignoring warnings that a man was spiraling into violent delusions, and he's still out there. Well, that's interesting. This is the first I've heard about that. Elon says, bang. Interesting framing, but it's actually worse than this. With cancer, the median victim is 73, whereas the median car accident victim is 35. If you're anti-self-driving, you're arguing for more windows and more orphans and far more people in wheelchairs. The annual social cost of cancer and auto accidents are roughly equivalent. Imagine a new cancer drug came out that reduced mortality by 90% across every cancer. And the AMA aggressively lobbied against it because of its potential suppressive impact on hospital visits and surgeries. This is the union's WRT to autonomous robotaxis right now. Yeah. I mean, I can confirm. I have to agree that full self-driving in a Tesla is arguably safer than regular driving. It really is. I would not be telling you the truth if I were to say anything against full self-driving. It has saved our butts on more than one occasion. From people who are dressed in black, who are completely invisible to my sight that it was able to see, and also swerving to avoid accidents on the freeway. It is definitely worth it. Where are we? Okay, from Mike Lee. Let's see, responding to Alex Avtoon. McLaughlin poll released today shows 1 in 8 would-be GOP voters stay home in the midterms in ME, GA, and North Carolina, or Maine, Georgia, and North Carolina. That same drop in 2024 loses Trump, GA, and North Carolina. Same drop in 2022 loses GOP the North Carolina Senate race. Save America Act turnout risk. Okay, Armageddon awaits the Senate GOP if we don't get the Save America Act passed into law. Let's freaking go. Yeah, well, Democrats seem to be dropping out of Congress like flies, so maybe we'll get to a balance here sooner rather than later. South African politician, we are cutting the throats of, geez. Why doesn't legacy media report anything about anti-white racism happening in South Africa? Wow. That's nuts, man. Good question. What is this about?
It's no secret that Elon Musk is vehemently opposed to racist laws in South Africa.
Yeah.
First of all, you should be questioning why are there racist laws in South Africa? That's the first problem. That's what you should be attacking. It's improper for there to be racist laws in South Africa. All races should be treated equally, and there should be no preference given to one or the other. Whereas there are now 140 laws in South Africa that give strong preference to if you're a black South African, and not otherwise. And so now I'm in this absurd situation where I was born in South Africa but cannot get a license to operate in Starlink because I'm not black.
Well, it looks
Does
like
that
that's
seem
about.
right to
It
you?
looks
Does
like
seem
that.
right to you?
Looks like that's about to change.
We've heard this so many times. Are we? Did he not post very many times today either? Because I think these are from yesterday, aren't they? April 13th? Or is he just reposting stuff? No, this is all from April 13th. 2 hours ago. I don't think I think today is just a low post day for both of them. He posted that. Yep, posted that. I mean, it counts. Just a very low post day. Huh. Yikes. Wow. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we saw all this. Wow. Short day. Well, all right. Well, let's move on to BB. See what he posted. I imagine probably not very much. Seems like we might be a short day today. Short live. That's all right. I got a video to publish. I didn't get published today from yesterday, so maybe we'll just publish that today and call that good. All right, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meets Czech Foreign Minister Peter Machinka. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, Tuesday, April 14th, at the Prime Minister's office. Is it English?
I'm delighted to have this visit by our great friends from Czechia. The foreign minister is an exemplary representative of this friendship. I want to thank you and, of course, Andrej Babiš for the great support that follows a very long tradition between the Czech people and the Jewish people. In the previous century, it proved to be a remarkably moral partnership that has been proven by time, and now we're trying to elevate it to an even higher status. I want to thank you for your friendship and for your integrity. So thank you, and welcome to Jerusalem.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to have this visit by...
Alrighty. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on... Okay. Fallen soldier. More fallen soldiers. That's a hour long. We can't watch that. Let's go see what he posted on his. Same thing. Together with all citizens of Israel, my wife and I send our heartfelt condolences. Oh, no. Yeah, that is just the fallen soldier. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remarks at the opening ceremony for Holocaust martyrs and heroes, Remembrance Day at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Okay. The flourishing state of Israel will continue to serve as a beacon of liberty, progress, and prosperity. Israel soldiers who courageously protect our homeland will continue to be an inspiration. As it is written in the book of Chronicles, mighty men of valor, fit for the army of war, who can handle shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions. As a nation of lions we shall continue, with God's help, to roar the roar of eternity. Am Yisrael Kale. Let's see. In Rafah in Philadelphia corridor in Gaza, in the Beeper operation and the elimination of the arch murderers Deif Sinwar, Nasrallah, and others in Lebanon, Syria, Judea, and Samaria, Yemen, and, of course, Rising Lion and Roaring Lion. Between these two intense operations, I visited our great friend, President Trump, several times in the United States. During one of those visits, my wife and I met Holocaust survivor Jake Waxall, He is 101 years old. Wow. Holocaust Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance Day. Oh, was that yesterday? Alrighty. Well, there you go. I don't have a video to respond to today, but I did find something interesting. So this comes from, there's a post on the social from Wayne. Wayne, thank you. If you're in the chat today, thank you for posting this. So Wayne says the Book of Jubilee show how Cain could not be the offspring of Gadriel. So he's referring to a theory of mine, which is trying to understand why we're dead in trespasses and sin, why there is such a deep emphasis on blood in the scripture, because it's the blood of the Lamb that causes death to pass over. It's also, Jesus shedding his blood that saved us. It is, in Revelation, it said that we are washed in the blood of the Lamb, are made clean. Our robes are made clean in the blood of the Lamb, which is, that should get your attention when you're like, why is there such an emphasis on blood? So in the effort to try and answer that question, one of the theories I had is it possible that Cain is the offspring of a union between Eve and Gadriel? And that's based on a scripture. That's based on one very small phrase in the book of Enoch. When it's talking about the Watchers, it says that Gadriel, not only did he teach men all the blows of death, but he's also the one who deceived Eve. But what's interesting is it's kind of a far-fetched theory, because and this is what Wayne is pointing out, is that there are contradictions that would make it seem impossible. And one contradiction that he's pointing out is in the Book of Jubilees, shows how Cain could not be the offspring of Gadriel or any other watcher or angel. Also, Adam knew Eve before being put into Eden. Yeah, so I finally got around to reading this, and what it basically says is that Cain was born in 64. Cain and Abel was born in 64 a.m., which is interesting. My first thought was, okay, well, then if Cain was born, when Adam and Eve were 64 years old, then what was the serpent? What was the introduction? What was the fruit that Eve ate? And for the life of me, I can't actually reconcile an answer. Everything comes down to an assumption, to where due to the very apparent contradiction. So Jubilees, which is a legit pseudographical book, meaning we can't confirm the authors, but we know that the age is appropriate, and it's been, found with other scriptures, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that Jesus would have had access to. I mean, so there is some situation for maybe calling into question its validity, but that's really the farthest thing from my mind. But what this does is you have a contradiction here between Jubilees and Enoch, and it's represented here. So if we come into my little timeline, I have to refresh. So I added a new simulation for this. Oops, got logged out. All right, I added a new simulation for this. So this right here assumes the Watchers came in like shortly after Adam and Eve. This simulation actually puts the Watchers, so there's a record in Enoch, I found this today. There's a record in Enoch, the book of Enoch, which says the Watchers touched down on the mountain in the days of Jared. So this is the days of Jared, which are 460 is when Jared was born. So 460 years after Adam and Eve, according to the book of Enoch, is when the Watchers came down to earth, which makes sense because that's when this Enoch, who mediated on their behalf with God in order to protect their children, the Nephilim, that actually makes sense. And that it also puts, what I don't know, there's still some interesting things to consider here, because it puts them right before Methuselah, which when we're talking large distances, so like they could have been around for 200 years. Anyway, so this is not a fair representation of time. And here's another thing that I found out today. So this was working from the theory of, could Cain be the offspring of Gadriel? Well, not if Jubilees is correct. So Jubilees says that Cain was born in 60 a.m., which is right here. So if he was born in 60 a.m., that would put him... it got reset. Anyway, that would put him right here. What's interesting, though, is I did the math. I was curious on how many people could populate. So if you start with just one couple, Adam and Eve, how many people could they produce in 60 years? And you would be surprised, as I was. I would think that like maybe max a couple hundred, like maybe 100, 200 in 60 years. As it turns out, we're told that Adam and Eve were put into the garden and given the command to be fruitful and multiply. So we can assume that they started producing children pretty much immediately. Granted, there are records in like Jubilee which say that it took about 7 years or something like that. There is a question of 7 years. Let's just put it that way. But just because this is such a complex subject, just assuming one couple given 60 years of time, how many people could they produce? As it turns out, if everybody was aggressively producing children, there could possibly be more than 1 million, believe it or not. The math works out that you can produce more than 1 million people in 60 years. That's Google's answer. The more realistic answer is, if they're not aggressively trying to be fruitful and multiply, is between 9,000 and 28,000, which is still a very surprising number. So that's assuming that they're producing children. The children grow till they're about 15 years old, and then at 15 they produce they start to be fruitful and multiply, and then their children, everybody is constantly producing children every year up until 60. You can get about 9,000 people in 60 years. So why is that important? Well, because the Watchers, there had to have been at least 200 women, right? For them to be attracted to and lust after them. So there's just one tiny record in Enoch that says Gadriel is the one who deceived Eve. So we're left, because there is no other information that I can find. So we're left to, there's only a few conclusions that we can draw from that. One, that Gadriel had visited the earth or the Garden of Eden prior to the Watchers making their agreement to come down and take wives in 460 a.m. So that's one possibility. So Gadriel could have come down to earth, and it just wasn't recorded that he was the father of Cain. That's one possibility. But there's I don't know of any way that we can prove that. It's purely 100% an assumption. Or what's another assumption that we can draw from that? That it could have been added into the texts. So one of the texts could have an error. So either Enoch can have an error, and maybe Gadriel deceiving Eve was an addition or misinterpreted. Likewise with Jubilees, but I would say Jubilees has a lot more information. It's less likely that it was manipulated. So here's the thing, though, is if we can't prove, if there's not enough evidence to actually prove genetic manipulation, I don't know where that leaves us with what caused Cain to murder. How did that mentality enter into Cain's mind? According to Jubilees, the fall happened in their lifetime. Happened before he was born, I believe. So, I mean, there's more work to do in that regards, but I think I've gone as far as I can, unless anybody has any other ideas for how we can. I mean, I've looked for other texts. Is there any other information in any other texts? I can't find anything. You have two apparent contradictions. I do believe that I am of the opinion that the sin in the blood, that the reason for the emphasis of blood is because whatever Adam and Eve did when they took of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, whatever that constituted, it had an effect on the bloodline. Now, it could be spiritual. It could simply be that they... Well, so see, here's the thing about the serpent, though, is the only indication we have of who the serpent is Gadriel. Which, that would make sense if you have the Watchers who actually bring knowledge. And I mean, Enoch actually shows the knowledge that they taught. That seems to be the more likely thing that could be what God warned against. Don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So learning from the Watchers and, potentially producing children. I mean, I don't think there's any question. There's zero question that there was producing progeny with the Watchers. It's just that on when that took place. According to Enoch and the book of Jubilees, they both agree that the Watchers came down in 460, which is in the days of Jared. And that makes sense because that would be when Enoch, the Enoch who interceded on their behalf, did his thing. So, I don't know. I think this is myth busted. It's like Mythbusters. I think it's myth busted that that Cain is probably not the progeny of Gadriel. Unless, and this is purely a theory, unless you make the assumption that Gadriel had visited the Garden of Eden prior to them actually coming down to Earth, which is, I mean, I guess we just don't have we have zero textual evidence to that. That's just 100% an assumption, and we have nothing to validate it. So, but that would explain, like, if the Watchers, if the Garden of Eden is somewhere other than Earth, maybe Adam and Eve and the Watchers were kind of in the same area at the same time, and that is a possibility. Maybe we can chase down that, but I think it's just a theory. So it is what it is. It's a contradiction. Anyway, that's all I got. So that's I was looking into Wayne's comment on that and studying Jubilees. So definitely still corruption in the blood, because regardless of when the Watchers come, which is Jared, that they were producing progeny. which that could still mean that there's corruption in our blood and why we need to be saved. But the real question to answer, because when God spoke to Eve and said this, the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent, and he will bruise his heel. That was in this period of time. That wasn't around the Watchers. Interesting. Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be a totally spiritual thing. So whatever they're taking of the knowledge of good and evil could have been something spiritually that had an effect on them spiritually, which ultimately had an effect on the blood. Because there is new science, and this is where science is very interesting. There is science coming out that there's this new field called quantum biology, which suggests that there is a quantum mechanics element to life, which is interesting because that explains prayer. But that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, short day. That's all I got. Thought I'd share that with you guys. What do you guys think? What are you guys talking about in the chat? Let's see. Prophecy is the spirit of Jesus Christ. I agree that both Elon and Trump both have an anointing on their lives, but I'm expecting more about the righteousness of God, saving graces through Jesus. You and me both. The end times is not going at all how I expected it to go. It is a by the seat of our pants observation, I'll tell you what. If you think if you think that only a preacher can possibly be a witness, then you are misreading the Bible. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is I think that, expectation and reality rarely parallel each other. We tend to, I think of it like, when you're anticipating some gift or some surprise, sometimes it's like the way you dream and fantasize about how wonderful something's going to be. And that, like your first car, boy, did I fantasize about all the amazing things I do when I got my first car. And the reality of my first car was a clunker that I couldn't drive very far. I mean, like expectation, you can understand expectation and reality were not parallel. I feel that way with end time events. Like I had this, fantasy expectation of the end time events. The biggest thing that I was expecting with the end times events was famine. Where's the famine? I mean, back in 2021, I think it was. When was it? It was actually 2019. It was 2019. It was beginning of 2020, end of 2019, where when there was the recognition that we're in the end times, we went crazy and started preparing for a famine. I still have food I bought 8 years ago expecting a famine. Where's the famine? You know what I mean? I can understand why, there's in the scripture, it talks about the saints getting worn out. I'm definitely worn out. There's so many things that I thought were going to happen. And honestly, like so many people, I believed the original narrative about the end times. Unfortunately, there's still people who believe that narrative that are looking for this Antichrist figure to go into the temple and declare himself God, and that's going to be the big aha moment that we're in the end times. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Not the way people are imagining it. All right, let's see. The two witnesses have definite roles and characteristics. Preaching wasn't one of them. That's correct. Prophesying for 1,260 days, which prophecy, the best I can tell from Scripture, has two definitions, two types of prophecy. One is speaking the truth, and one is telling the future. I hate being, let's see, but that doesn't mean they weren't some of the watchers on the earth during those early days. Just because they came en masse later doesn't preclude them. See, and that's the thing, is that's the only thing I can conclude from that as well, Fury, is that would mean, so that statement in Enoch could be like a parentheses statement. Like it's kind of like Gadriel was the one who taught men all the blows of death. He was also the one who deceived Eve. Like, referring back to a time in the past, but there's just no other information. So, I mean, it could be that. It could be that he visited her previously Maybe he, maybe like a scout, he went to look at the daughters of men, said, hey, there's some pretty good looking men, came back and told the boys, which could have ultimately caused them to want to go down and lust after. Of course, they're watchers. That the name implies that they probably were aware of what's going on. Adam and Eve being prototypes for humans. Could it be possible that this is just an explanation in the Bible to show us how the bloodline got contaminated? Funny you should say that. I got into the most interesting conversation with Grok today. I really think that's what it is I think that it's entirely possible that it's not literal, but it gives us an idea of how things went down. And I know that probably goes against some people who believe that the Bible is literal, that everything in the scripture is 100% literal. But the thing that you have to deal with when you consider the Bible to be literal is there are figures of speech that do not convert over to a literal piece of reality. And also there are contradictions. There are apparent contradictions where you have to reconcile how something can actually be. So, yeah, you could be right. It could literally just be giving us an example of how things could have gone down using figures of speech and explanations that I don't know. Maybe we'll discover another book that gives us more details. The Book of Enoch number 3 that talks about the watchers and their jobs, what they did before they decided to come down to earth and agree together to sin. Sometimes the stories were not literal, but meant for us to understand. Okay, yeah. Like Cain and Abel, to show the division between the two sets of people. Yeah, and what's interesting with Cain and Abel is how it parallels. Messiah 2030 did a really good job of showing how each one of the days of Genesis 1 corresponds to an age that has happened on earth in the last 6,000 years. In other words, the 6 days of creation represent, because we're going into year 6,000 here soon, whether you believe we're in, 15, 20 years away from the year 6,000 or whether you believe that 2026 is your 6,000. There is an argument to be made that Genesis 1, when it's talking about, the first day, the second day, the third day, could potentially be referring to the first 1,000 years, the second 1,000 years, the third 1,000 years, stuff like that. Which that's an interesting perspective. That's one that Messiah 2030 explores. If you haven't seen that video, they explore that like crazy. Like they really, really push that theory. Let's see the chosen lineage and the others of the spiritual alienated lineage. No, it was so funny. It was Grok. I was getting into this conversation with Grok today, just trying to find any other sources of information. What was it doing? Boy, it is super. Grok is really religious. It really leans heavily into like church interpretations rather than what's actually written. I kept trying to get it to just give me what is actually written in the books, tell me what it says, and tell me how that translates to reality. And it kept giving me the church interpretations of things, which was super annoying. I'm like, I don't want the interpretations that people have written about this. I just want you to acknowledge what's actually written. I need to know, are there any other mentions of, the watchers visiting the Garden of Eden prior to the days of Jared? Yeah. Let's see. No, someone walking into the temple and saying, "Look at me, I'm God," would be obvious. Yeah. Well, and that's a really good argument, is like, what would that look like today? I know that people liken it to like Nero or a Caesar walking in and declaring that they are king, or even potentially God, but it's not our culture. I don't think there's anybody on the planet that would believe if somebody walked in and, well, you're always going to find there's always going to be the idiots who believe, but like it would be such a small number of people that it would like be a cult thing, that somebody would have to, the temple gets built, and then they would get past temple security and go in and declare themselves God. I can't imagine anybody on the world stage doing that, but I don't know. A lot can change in a year or two. I mean, like, it's entirely possible, but it's very hard to imagine that that would fool anybody, especially since that is the primary like narrative about the end time events. Like, if everybody is saying that's going to happen, who in their right mind is going to walk in the temple and do that? Like, basically just go claim to be the Antichrist. That's ridiculous. Ethiopian Bible. Yeah, there's more. That is interesting. There's more coming out in the Ethiopian Bible that could be relevant and helpful. The Book of Enoch was protected, and Jubilees was protected in the Ethiopian Bible, and they are finding that there have been changes to the texts, which is interesting. That's definitely worth investigating. That's for sure. Believe the Bible is literal at times, symbolic at times, and also spiritual at times. Yeah. Yep. Sometimes Grok is very indoctrinated. Indeed. Yeah. You have to understand, when it comes to the scripture, I believe that it was spoken by holy men of God. Absolutely. I believe that what God told them was true. But at the same time, I also believe that some of what was communicated to them, failing to understand the future, they used the best terminology that they could to describe things, which sound interesting, which sound like figures of speech. So like in Book of Revelation, when it's talking about what is it, the grasshoppers from the bottomless pit that have scorpions' tails and face like a man, that could be describing an Apache helicopter, those kind of things. So I don't think that you'll get the full understanding if you always look at things from a literal perspective. You have to look at things from a real perspective. So what did it mean to them when the information was given to them, and what could it translate to today? Like, this is specifically when dealing with prophecy, prophecy from the perspective of future events. Were they speaking literally, or were they speaking figuratively that would make sense when it happened, such as the two witnesses breathing fire? Physically, I don't know of any way that that's possible for two men to actually breathe fire on a consistent basis and burn enemies with fire from their mouth. But it sure makes a hell of a lot of posts when they flame people on Twitter and Truth Social. And both Elon Musk and Donald Trump do a good job at that. You think humans reinterpreted scripture and changed it, hid parts to protect their own agenda? That's for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's evident in that there's so many different translations. And I know that there's been scholars that have come out and made stupid claims. That just goes to show they're not scholars. I don't think anybody is fooled that every translation is identical or that they're exact copies. It's just like every time somebody comes out with a translation, it's usually because they want it to favor their particular doctrine or belief. One of the reasons why I used to read the Amplified version of the Bible is because multiple denominations came together to actually produce that book, and it's kind of funny to read. Because it's so exhaustive, and you can just tell when they were discussing how they wanted to interpret it, that everybody wanted to make sure they got their words in there for their particular doctrinal belief. So it's pretty exhaustive, and it pretty much covers the gamut across several different denominations. One of the reasons why I just read New King James now is I read the King James for the first half of my life, the these and thous and thys and shouts. And I have to be honest, because I don't talk like that, my comprehension level and my understanding was not nearly as high when I was reading King James as it is when I'm reading New King James. New King James is comparable to the way I talk. So reading New King James, there's just a much better comprehension. Even if the translation might not be as good, I know one of the arguments for the King James is it preserves the most figures of speech, which might be true, but it also might be that that's where the work was done. Like E.W. Bullinger, he did his work with King James to produce the figures of speech. But I imagine that the majority of that work translates over to the New King James as well. You just, if the words are slightly different, you just go look it up. But I know my comprehension is so much higher when it's written in English that is more like what we talk about, more like we talk today. We are seeing proof of that as the Ethiopian Bible gets interpreted. Yeah, like the Schofield Bible is the reason people believe in dispensationalism. Yeah, well, yeah. And it's funny because what was that Bible I was really getting into when Chris and I were working together? The Sefer. You guys know the Sefer? Even the Sefer, which, the gentleman who translated this, still very opinionated. There are definitely sections in there that are, and he, admittedly so. I mean, he wholeheartedly admits that, when it came to translating certain sections, he had options, and he would choose the options that made the most sense to him, which was, through his bias. So that's just something that happens with translators is when you're working with language, you're going to translate it into the language that makes sense to you. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. So like this idea that, the words that we have today are perfect and pure, you got to take that with a grain of salt. There's still work that needs to take place to understand things. There's mysteries that are hidden. And one of the reasons why I think we should probably focus more on loving one another than actually like being right when it comes to, teaching like you're going to go to hell if you don't believe what I believe, or, Jesus you're not going to be in the rapture if you don't believe what I believe. Like those kind of mentalities are very destructive in the church. And I don't think it's what Jesus came to show. I mean, the ultimate example of how we should treat one another is when he's on the cross and he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," highlights, just the extreme degrees at which people can really screw up. I mean, they killed the Lord of glory, and he prayed for their forgiveness, prayed to forgive them because they did it in ignorance, So it's just like, it's one of the reasons why I stopped building that prophecy claims website. It's just like, I can't in good conscience build a tool that attacks people and tries to exclude them when, they could just be making a mistake. It's just like iron sharpens iron. Yeah. We should be spending more time looking how we can help one another. And, if somebody is particularly agitating to you, find out why. That's a good practice. It's a good practice to, if somebody, I get agitated when people speak inaccurately. That's something I can get better at. You know what I mean? Like, I guess been getting better at it when people use Antichrist for everything. I have almost like an autistic nail on chalkboard voice in my head anytime I hear somebody use the word Antichrist incorrectly, but that's just me. But we can all get better. We should focus on loving one another. What can we do to help and support mankind? How can we visit those who are spiritually hungry or spiritually naked? You know what I mean? And help clothe them, rather than trying to label them and mark them to be avoided. There's definitely, I think there is an element of that when somebody is dangerous, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't circle back and try and help them see, because God can work on their hearts. You can plant seeds Doesn't mean you have to stick around and deal with, all the pests and the weeds. You can let God deal with the pests and the weeds. Yep. Oh, I love all these Bibles. Tyndale, I've got one of those. I love Tyndale. I do love the Sefer. But, admittedly, it is, he's got his own biases in there. And when you're studying something and looking for clear answers, even in the Sefer, you still have to engage your brain because some of the stuff is translated in a very opinionated manner. So I don't think there's a perfect Bible out there. We don't have any of the originals. The best we've got is copies of copies, which by and large, the copies are pretty darn good. Even, the funny thing is even between copies, they're not perfect. They didn't have computers, as far as we can tell back then, to do digital, digitally perfect copies, unfortunately. When you're writing something by hand, when you're copying something by hand, it stands to reason that, mistakes will be made. And there's not a lot, but there's definitely examples of mistakes between copies. One transcript will have the word God, where another transcript will have the word witch. Witch, W-H-I-C-H. Anyway, I don't have anything else. You guys have anything else? I think we're just going to call it a short night tonight. Not a whole lot to cover. I know China was testing the Strait of Hormuz, last I heard. I think they had made it through. Let's see. The major problem I have is if they flame people or go after our president, criticize his actions or policies, but keep your TDS out of it. Make sure you are doing so for a solid reason and not. Yeah, I still have friends on my Facebook who have severe Trump derangement syndrome. I figure I'll let them block me. It's almost like a game. Like, I probably should block some of these people because they are very, very bad. But I don't know. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment in some of those cases. I probably should block them. I've only blocked that I can think of one person. One person that I can think of they were just coming after me. They were just being outright mean and would not stop. So, no, I blocked two. Yeah, I have blocked two. There was one more recently, a couple years ago, that was being very inappropriate. But that's personal attacks, not like Trump derangement syndrome. I suspect TDS kind of fueled some of it. But anyway. All right, well, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else we should cover? Oh, there's this. Let me see if I can find this video. You guys heard about this Game Plan 18? This is interesting. Okay, well, I can't find the video. It's not Game Plan, it's Game something. And it puts forth a theory that what Donald Trump is trying to do is facilitate. In short, the way I interpreted it was what he is trying to do with pulling out of like NATO and bringing to the world's attention that they didn't do squat when we needed them. The restructuring of the world. This Game Plan 18, I think that's what it's called, but it leans towards this idea of reconfiguring the economic power because China is getting too close to eliminating the petrodollar or something like that. And it basically aims to divide the world into two superpowers, which includes like Russia as one and the United States and Canada as another. So that's something that's been coming up, which is interesting because that could be the beginning of the beast from the land with two horns. We could be seeing the foundation of that being laid, which I know people are immediately going to go, oh, see, that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the second beast. But you have to remember that if he's one of the two witnesses, that doesn't exclude them from setting these things up. Same thing with, like, if Elon Musk is building some, if the mark of the beast is something, something electronic, you remember the two witnesses are killed after 3.5 years. So it's entirely possible that they are actually building something for the end time infrastructure that they don't implement, but whoever, rises up at that time could be the one who implements it. The thing that we take away from all this is all these things have to happen. But yeah, so I think it's called maybe it's called Strategy 18. Let me try that. Strategy. No, it's not coming up either. Maybe if I use Trump Strategy 18. That's too long. That's 3 hours. Let's go look at Tim Pool. He's talked about it a couple of times. Timcast. Let's see. I think it's on this channel. Let's see. China breaks U.S. blockade Strait of Hormuz. I think this is it. Let's listen to some of this for a bit.
Yesterday, Donald Trump announced a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz for ships seeking to enter or exit Iranian ports. Now, China has defied that blockade after calling it dangerous. They successfully got an oil tanker through the strait. Now, the question is, what are the goals of this war with Iran? And many have asked this. Now, I believe Donald Trump's intention was to shut down the strait. Of course, when I bring this up, many people say, Tim, you are coping. It's a coping to seethe. Donald Trump has failed on the war with Iran. Israel forced us to do it. But I say this, my friends, I see something strange happening. When you take a look at the intentions of the United States as it pertains to oil and the economic order that controls how oil is sold around the world, everything lines up perfectly. It all makes sense. The Qatar-Turkey pipeline, resulting in a war in Syria, Burisma in Ukraine, Russia trying to take Crimea. Seems like all of this has to do with the liberal economic order and control of energy globally. Saddam Hussein wanted to trade oil in euro. He died. Muammar Gaddafi wanted to trade oil in gold dinar. He died. And now we have this. What is the outcome of what is occurring with the war in Iran? Well, there's something called Game Theory 18.
Game Theory.
Where a Chinese professor says that Trump's intention was to get the Strait of Hormuz closed because it's where China gets a large portion, a major chunk of its oil. Iran exporting oil, as well as other Gulf states, and selling this oil to China. Whether it was intentional or not, one thing is certain. China is suffering with this blockade and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. On top of that, U.S. crude exports in the Gulf are reaching record levels. So the outcome is obvious. But what is the reason behind it? Now, there are naysayers online. They say Donald Trump was tricked into this ideological war for greater Israel, which, I gotta be honest, seems fabricated, whole cloth. What are they even talking about? No, I'm well aware of these ideas that Israel wants to expand. They want to move into Lebanon, etc. We get it. Syria, we get it. They want to control the whole region, including Iran, and Iran's the only thing standing in their way. But the actions that we see from the U.S. don't align with whatever that is. When you take a look at Panama, Taiwan, Greenland, and now what's happening with Iran and the Strait, it very much does seem like the U.S.'s plan the whole time was to close the Strait of Hormuz. The question then, of course, why not just come out and say that? I think it's actually quite simple, my friends. The U.S. is never going to come out and say we started a war for oil. They're never going to come out and say we blew people up for cheap energy. They won't do it. They've not done it. They're not going to do it now. Although we all kind of know that's the big play, right? Donald Trump will not come out and say to the American people, your cost of living is going up, your energy prices are increasing because we are trying to choke out China and win an economic conflict. The idea is actually quite simple. Trump is launching a sacrificial attack, taking great damage to the U.S. economy to create much more damage to our adversaries, to China, to Iran, and many others. Could it be that Trump started this war hoping Iran was going to shut the strait down? And then when Iran announced they were going to reopen it, what happens? Trump says we're going to blockade anybody trying to trade with Iran, maintaining the stranglehold on China. At the same time, before this war began, what did the U.S. do? They went and got Maduro and seized the largest producer of crude, Venezuela. Now again.
Yeah, so that's, in a nutshell, this Game Theory 18. Now this is, I found it. I just couldn't remember that it was called Game Theory. So this is the guy.
About an hour ago, Donald Trump addressed the American people. This follows an address from Prime Minister Albanese of Australia to his people, as well as Prime Minister Starmer to the British people. And in both speeches by Starmer and Albanese, they said to the people, we know that fuel prices, gas prices are going up, and we should expect more pain, but we will do as much as we can to ensure that your wallet is not too impacted. Donald Trump, in his address to the American people, basically said that this war will continue, and America may start to bomb energy and oil infrastructure of Iran. Okay, so let's listen to a few of his words.
Our economy is strong and improving by the day, and it will soon be roaring back like never before. It will top the levels that it was a month ago. I've made clear from the beginning of Operation Epic Fury that we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Okay, so he's basically saying that we're winning this war and we will bomb them to the Stone Ages, which tells us he's actually not winning this war. Okay, now I also want to look at another person who is Peter Hegseth.
New strategic map.
So remember, this war in Iran, it's not ending. In fact, many people believe it's only starting to ramp up. So there are rumors that Donald Trump has already authorized the use of ground forces. And so we could see an invasion of Iran as early as this weekend, but certainly, definitely this month, okay? But while America is fighting this war in Iran, this is the Secretary of War, Peter Hegseth, and he's announced that America will control all of North America.
From Greenland to the Gulf of America to the Panama Canal and its surrounding countries. At the Department of War, we call this strategic map the Greater North America. Why? Because every sovereign nation and territory north of the equator, from Greenland to Ecuador and from Alaska to Guyana, is not part of the global south. It is a security perimeter in this great neighborhood that we all live in.
Okay? So basically, what he's saying is we will enforce the Monroe Doctrine in North America. So it sounds very strange to people in that Donald Trump is fighting this war in Iran that's not really winnable. At the same time, he is being aggressive in North America. He's seeking fights with Canada, with Denmark over Greenland, with Colombia, with Mexico, with Cuba. In fact, he's embargoing Cuba right now, and people expect possibly an invasion of Cuba very soon. So people just think that Donald Trump is all over the place and he's idiotic, okay? So this is Iran, and everyone says that a ground invasion of Iran would be stupid because it is much too large to invade. Right now, America has only about 50,000 troops in the Middle East, and the geography, the terrain, makes it very hard to control, okay? So you have these mountains, the Zagros Mountains, which allows for the Iranians to hide and conduct guerrilla warfare and use drone strikes and artillery strikes. And then you have the desert, which makes it very hard to cross, okay? So even if the Americans were to attack from here, from Iraq, they would have to face the mountains. If they were attacked from Pakistan, from the east, they would have to face deserts, okay? And if they were to attack from the south, they would face all these mountains. And also you're far away from Tehran, which is ultimately your objective. Okay? So there's lots of conversations about what the Americans are trying to do. Right now the consensus seems to be the Americans first want to control the Strait of Hormuz in order to elevate the strain on the global economy, okay? But as you can see from this map, first of all, the strait, it's not very wide, and it's very close to the Iranian coastline in the mountains, so it's easy to attack from. And there are these, and then the Iranians can put mines all around the strait as well. So what everyone tells us is that an invasion of Iran would just be idiotic. But at the same time, the Americans need to free up the Strait of Hormuz and allow for maritime navigation in order to stabilize the global economy, okay? Already we're seeing lots of signs that America is preparing for a long, long war. So there are already 50,000 troops in the Middle East, and a lot of them will be deployed against Iran. But also, there's a letter from Leonard Anderson to reserves, telling them we must get ready to deploy, fight, and win. Okay? So not only have they sent 50,000 troops to the Middle East, but they're preparing to call up the reserves as well. Okay? So this seems as though America is preparing for total war. Party market is a very interesting place to understand how global events will turn out, okay? And so there are three indicators that, in fact, a war is coming, a ground invasion is coming. First of all, the pizza index is exploding. What does this mean? It means that in the Pentagon, when they're preparing to launch a ground invasion, they need to work overtime. And so they call for pizza, okay? And so pizza deliveries are going up. Gay bars are empty. Okay, so when people are, don't have much to do, they go and, go on dates.
Interesting.
The last is that people are making bets, large bets, that a ground invasion will happen, okay? So these are people who have inside information, and so they go on Polymarket and make a bet that this will happen, knowing it will happen. So this guy bet $200,000 that
JD Vance in his talk at TP USA actually addressed that and said that he thinks that we should prosecute anyone in a government position who are using information that they learn in the markets to make money. Because he said what happens is you get these people who will sit through a briefing who have top secret clearance, and they'll learn about something that we're about to do. And then they'll go start buying stocks. He used Nancy Pelosi as an example, like, when they were learning about the Wuhan flu, People in Congress were investing in pharmaceutical companies and pulling their investments from the airline companies and stuff like that, knowing that there was going to be a lockdown. It was funny that he was making that comment that traders use it as a legit metric to determine on what they should buy and sell.
A ground invasion will happen, and if it turns out a ground invasion does happen, he will win over $1 million. Okay, so these are 3 very good indicators that a ground invasion has been approved and it will happen very, very soon. Okay, Donald Trump himself has said many things. Okay, so he said that, you know what, if we leave the Middle East, it's not our problem. We don't really care, okay? And he also says that, hey, NATO, it's your responsibility to open the Strait of Hormuz because we told you so and because you need the oil. And of course, NATO is angry at Donald Trump because previously, Donald Trump threatened to take over Greenland. Okay, so everyone thinks Donald Trump is just a moron. He doesn't plan ahead. Because before this war in Iran, where he needs the help of NATO, he was pissing off NATO by threatening to take over Greenland. So Donald Trump is over the place. He's just a moron, right? But let's just assume, okay, that the ground invasion goes ahead. What will happen? Well, as I predicted before, if a ground invasion were to go ahead, first of all, America would lose this war because a ground invasion would fail, and the Iranians are fully prepared for a ground invasion. Second of all, if America loses this war, the American empire would die because it would be forced out of the Middle East. They would lose the petrodollar and the US dollar as a global reserve currency. And the third thing is the global economy would collapse. So clearly, Donald Trump is the worst president in human history. And he's a complete buffoon, right? Okay, but let's put our thinking caps on. Okay, let's use game theory and say, but what if, for some strange reason, Donald Trump wants to lose this war in Iran? What if he wants the American empire to collapse? What if Donald Trump wants to destroy the...
So now he's getting into what the actual game theory is behind this. And what's interesting about this is it could be the foundation for the beast from the land, the beast with 2 horns.
The global economy. And then he'd be a genius, right? Right? He's a moron because he's going to destroy the American empire, but if he actually wants to destroy the American empire, then the man is the greatest American president ever, okay? Okay, so we're gonna have a fun class today, and we're gonna make the argument that in fact, Donald Trump is a genius. That in fact, all this chaos is purposeful. That there's actually a plan behind all this, okay? That's the argument I want to make to you today. Okay, so what is the plan? What is going on here? All right, so first thing to notice is that the world gets 20%, okay? 20% of its oil from the Middle East, okay? Primarily going to East Asia. So India gets about 6% of its oil from the Middle East. Japan gets 75% of its oil from the Middle East. So East Asia is heavily dependent on Middle East oil, okay? But as you can see, it also goes to Europe as well, and then also to the United States. All right, so the world is dependent on the GCC oil. If this war continues, if ground forces are used, then all the oil from the Middle East collapses. And JP Morgan has come out and said that by mid-April, the world will run out of oil. Okay? So this is a disaster for the world. But it's not, it's just much more than energy needs, okay? So because Iran is constraining movement in the Strait of Hormuz, we're seeing 7 major shortages, okay? So yes, we know oil and LNG are being stopped, okay? But actually the problem is much worse, because look at phosphate, ammonium, sulfur, urea. This is food production, okay? Primarily used for fertilizers. In other words, if this war persists, not only will countries run out of energy, they'll also run out of food, okay?
Great Tribulation, anyone?
Also, look at this. Helium and sulfur are used for what? They're used for semiconductors, the production of semiconductors. You use helium and sulfuric acid in the production of semiconductors, which leads to AI, okay? So, in other words, this war in the Middle East, it's impacting everything in the modern economy, okay? If this war continues, the global economy could collapse. But again, we're making the assumption that Donald Trump is a genius, and this is all part of his big plan, okay? So what is his plan? All right, so, okay, we know that there's a lot of oil in the Middle East, okay? But, you know, oil is not as rare as people think it is. There's also a lot of oil in Canada. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, okay? Russia also has a lot of oil. So in other words, if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, if this war in the GCC continues, it doesn't mean the world no longer has oil. All it means is the world is now much more dependent on North America and Russia for oil. And so the global economy now shifts over to North America and to Russia, okay? So in other words, the United States starts a stupid war in the GCC in the Middle East. It can't possibly win, but it still benefits because now the world is much more dependent on North America, okay? Why is Venezuela important? Because America just took over Venezuela in January. Okay, and look, Canada has a lot of oil, and Trump is threatening to take over Canada. Okay, so
when I saw this, I see you've got which right now, you know, when you look at Revelation 13, and it says that the beast from the sea has 7 heads and 10 horns. You know, and then later on in Revelation, I think it's 17, it defines the heads as mountains and the horns as kings and stuff like that. The conclusion that you are led to believe that you would come to is that that's referring to nations. So whether it's talking about like the G7 or NATO, that beast from the sea seems to be some kind of coalition that runs the world today. And what's interesting is after 42 months, there's the rise of another beast, a beast from the land. And I don't think it's any coincidence that what Trump is doing is potentially restructuring the world order to where it may be in a position to where at the end of his term, which would be about 42 months fits nicely in a presidential term. 3.5 years. The presidential term is 4 years. So it fits in there, you know. What's interesting, when I look at this map, I go, wait a minute, you've got, you know, if you're restructuring the world into 2 superpowers, we could be looking at that right there.
Now let's look at who needs the oil. Well, this map tells you that if you're in the red, you consume more oil than you export. And who are these countries? Well, they're Europe, okay? and they are East Asia, as well as Australia. Okay? So, yes, I understand Donald Trump's an idiot. Yes, I understand that he's going to lose this war in the Middle East. Yes, I understand he's going to destroy the global economy, but for some strange reason, he benefits. And the United States benefits. Because now, Europe and China, Japan, Australia, they're much more dependent on North America for resources, for food, for energy. Okay?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. This guy's whole class is predictive history. This is game theory number 18. He's got game theory 17, 16, 15, 14, and even different theories after that. The reason I bring this up today in our show is this one has gone viral and is gaining traction as fitting what's actually happening, and people are theorizing that he might be onto something with what Donald Trump is doing. And the reason I'm bringing it up on the show is when I'm looking at the consolidation of power into two main superpowers, that reminds me a lot of a beast from the land with two horns. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's worth considering.
All right, food. Okay, so nitrogen is important for fertilizers. Okay.
There's also a lot to learn in here in regards to the Great Tribulation, because that's one thing we're looking for right now is the Great Tribulation.
You need nitrogen for fertilizers. And as you can, and what this map tells you is that if you are in the blue or the light blue, it means you produce more nitrogen than you need, so you export it. If you are not in the blue, then you're kind of screwed, okay? So basically, this area especially, this area, okay? Europe, as some parts of Europe, okay? So now they need more nitrogen. And again, before they were getting a lot of nitrogen, ammonia, from the Middle East. And now, where are they forced to get the nitrogen? From here and from here. Okay? So again, yes, I know Donald Trump's losing this war in the Middle East, but in the long term, America stands to benefit.
Which would make sense if you're looking at a transition of global powers.
Water, okay? Water is important because water tells us which areas are the most stable. Basically, if you have a lot of water, you're less prone to conflict. But if you don't have that much water, then you're prone to conflict, okay? So we look at, so if you're in a dark blue, you're good, okay? Nothing to worry about. If you are in the light blue, you are in a lot of trouble, okay? So if we look at this area, North America, pretty stable because lots and lots of fresh water, okay? If you look at Russia, pretty stable, lots and lots of fresh water. But if you're Africa, you're in a lot of trouble. If you're Europe, you're in a lot of trouble. If you are Middle East, you're in a lot of trouble. If you are Southeast Asia, you are not in that much trouble, but you are in some trouble, okay? So we already see how this map tells us where in the future, basically Russia and the United States, North America, are the most stable parts of the world with the most resources. And therefore, they are the most resilient, the most stable, okay? But if you go to Africa, Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, these are points of conflict in the world. So we can expect these places to become much more unstable over time. So in other words, all the United States and Russia have to do is maintain stability and then export resources to these places. And guess what? And then they make a lot of money for themselves. Okay? So again, I understand Donald Trump's an idiot. I understand this war in the Middle East is stupid. But from a long-term game theory perspective, the United States wins from this disaster. From a long-term perspective, okay? Now, you look at this map, you think, well, China's pretty good too, right? Like China has a lot of fresh water. The problem with China, though, is this. China sits on a lot of fresh water that Southeast Asia and India depends on, okay? So a lot of water is in the Tibetan Plateau, and it flows downstream into India and in Southeast Asia. If there were a drought, using game theory, we can suspect that China might want to keep the water for itself, right? In which case, Southeast Asia and India would be very angry, okay? So this is a potential flashpoint that we have to watch out for. Okay? So it seems like China is stable, but the surrounding areas are not so stable. And so China will be dragged into a conflict. Okay? All right. So let's summarize what we've learned so far. So these are the countries with the most oil reserves, okay? Venezuela. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Canada, Iraq, UAE, Kuwait, United States, Russia. Okay. All right. Now what's interesting about this is this. This war in the Middle East is going to knock out the oil production of Saudi Arabia, of Iran, of Iraq, of UAE, of Kuwait. Which leaves what? Which leaves, Venezuela, Canada, and the United States, okay? North America, and Russia. Okay? Now, then let's look at who has to buy oil. All right? Let's look at who buys oil. Well, the United States consumes a lot of oil, but again, it has its own supply of oil. China needs to import a lot of its oil needs, okay? So China imports about 75% of its oil needs. India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, okay? Germany, all right? So China, India, Japan, South Korea imports a lot of oil. And where does it get its oil from? The Middle East, right? So if it can't get its oil from the Middle East, then these four countries, China, India, Japan, and South Korea, will need it to get the oil either from the United States or Russia. Okay? And why does this matter? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at who owns the most U.S. treasuries. Basically, if you own a lot of U.S. treasuries, it means that you are financing American debt. America right now is $39 trillion in debt. That's a lot of money, but as long as people continue to buy U.S. debt, as long as people want to buy U.S. treasuries, it's not a problem, okay? It's a Ponzi scheme. Okay. So let's look at this. Who are the biggest holders of U.S. debt? Japan, China, right? Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, India. Okay, so this is all Asia. And we already said that Asia needs a lot of oil from the Middle East, right? Now let's look at others. United Kingdom is second, okay? Cayman Islands is basically just Europe as well. It's a money laundering operation, okay? Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada, France, Ireland, Switzerland. These countries are Europe. And again, where do we say?
You know, all this talk of oil reminds me of the harlot and how she intoxicates the world with her wine. I almost wonder if that's not oil.
Most oil from the GCC it goes to either Asia or Europe. And now because of the stupid war in the Middle East, Asia and Europe are now forced to buy oil from either Russia or the United States. And this is important, okay? This is important because previously there's a fear that these countries would stop buying U.S. treasuries because America is too heavily in debt. The American economy is too much of a Ponzi scheme. So there's this great fear that Europe and Asia would would move away from the US dollar and more towards Swiss francs or gold, okay? Now, because Europe and Asia need fertilizer, they need energy from the United States and North America, the United States no longer has to worry about its debt, okay? All right, the $39 trillion debt, not a problem, because the entire world is dependent on North America for resources. The policy can keep on going. So again, Donald Trump is an idiot, but he's so stupid, he's become a genius. Okay? All right. Now you're like, wait, but Donald Trump's an idiot. Where would he get this idea from? How would he know how to do this? And the answer is because Putin has already proven that this strategy works in Ukraine. Okay, so let me show you how. Okay, so this is the war in Ukraine. And as you can see, the dark red are areas in which Russia is contesting territory. The light red, the pink are areas in which Russia wants to gain territory. And as you can see, Russia still has a long way to go. And we're already 4 or 5 years into this war, which means that this war can go on for another 10, 20 years. It's a very slow grind. And it's good for Russia. Yes, I know that Russia is losing a lot of soldiers, and I know that the Russian economy is suffering, but this long war of attrition is good for Russia. Why? Well, because first of all, what it does is it allows Russia to industrialize its economy. Okay? It allows Russia to center its economy around war production. Okay? So the red, as you can see, is total industry. Okay? And as you can see, it's been going up since the war started. All right? Overall industry has been going up as well. Unfortunately, industries...
You know, you have to wonder, when you look at the end times, there's, especially in Ezekiel, a lot of information that takes place and a lot of information that's given about wars and conflicts and the state of the world and movements of nations and kingdoms. I mean, a good majority of the prophecies are in that regards. So one of the reasons why I think this stands out as important information to consider, and I'm not saying that he's right, but it's very interesting. I think, you know, from an observational perspective, he's hitting some interesting points that could line up with what's written about the end time, especially a lot of times, like when you're talking about the strain that different areas are going to go through based on resource constriction during the restructuring. And it's interesting that, you know, there's that scripture that talks about when Michael stands up, there will be great trouble such as never been since there were nations on the earth. Is, you know, a restructuring, a global restructuring would fit the description of that kind of tribulation.
That are not dominated by the military, that have no war purpose, it's actually going down. Okay? So it seems as though the entire Russian economy is being restructured for total war, for a long war. And that is the purpose, that is the goal. Okay, so again, the pink are military industries. The blue are civilian industries. And as you can see, the pink completely dominate the blue. And the trend is increasing, meaning it is possible in 4 or 5 years' time, Russia is primarily a war economy, industrializing to produce war weapons, okay, munitions. Specifically, drones, okay? These are drones.
That is a surprising thing that's been happening with Russia and Ukraine.
Right. So,
I have to admit, I thought that was going to be solved.
War, Russia was dependent on Iran for drones, okay? But then what happened over time is that Russia started to have its own domestic production, okay? So imports from Iran have stayed constant, and then domestic production has gone way up, which tells us that the Russian economy is industrializing for the production of drones. And Russia is preparing to fight
Isn't there a scripture?
long...
Isn't there a scripture about the scorpions and the locusts and, you know, the things from the bottomless pit that come out and sting men? I wonder if that was referring to drones.
War. Now, not only can Russia produce its own drones for the war, but it can also export its drones to Iran to fight against the Americans. Okay? And so you're like, wait a minute here. So Russia is switching its entire economy to war production, which means that Russia will always fight wars. Is that what Russia is planning? And the answer is yes, it is. Okay? And so let me explain why Russia is planning this. This is something called the Third Rome Plan. Okay? And this comes from the 1996 book, Foundations of Geopolitics, okay, by Alexander Dugin, who I think is one of the smartest geopolitical thinkers alive today, okay? And his argument is this. His argument is this unipolar moment of American dominance, it's going to fade away because it's too much focus on secularism, individualism, liberalism. And these ideas break apart community. These ideas are anti-human. So eventually, Western society, Western civilization will collapse because its values are abhorrent. And when it collapses, this gives opportunity for Moscow to become the third Rome, okay? We'll talk more about this in the future. But what's brilliant about Dugin is he recognizes that when the world collapses, all Russia has to do is stay stable and resilient. As long as it stays together, unified, cohesive, it'll be fine. Okay? Because as this global order collapses, as the global economy collapses, every other society will face eternal collapse, such as the United States, okay? So he predicts civil war in the United States as left and right go to war against each other, okay? He predicts collapse of China. He predicts collapse of the Middle East. He predicts collapse of Europe, okay? So all these places are collapsing. Basically, if you are the main pillar of the global economy, you are much more susceptible to collapse than if you are not, okay? So what Dugin says is this, okay, all right. So the strategy is, first of all, Russia needs to stay coherent. It needs to defend its territory. It needs to unify its people through nationalism, through religion, okay, through faith. And then what Russia needs to do is figure out allies that would support the Russian outlook. And these allies could include Japan, okay? Vietnam, India, Iran, okay?
You know, that's an interesting point. You know, if they're unifying through a religion, you know, one of the things that even today was self-evident is these large language models. Man, even Grok. I mean, OpenAI was or ChatGPT is way worse, but even Grok leans heavily on religious interpretations of things. If the beast from the sea, if we're looking at the formation of that beast from the sea and they're using religion as a catalyst, that would be an indication of, man, that's got to be the mechanism by which we are washed in the blood of the Lamb. You know, especially if you think of it in terms of enforcing the mark of the beasts, that's going to be a wake-up call. if there is something that happens that forces you to make a decision to declare an allegiance, wear a mark of some kind, that may be a final key that wakes people up as to what not to do. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely going to be people who are going to just do it, just like the same people who, boy, I got to be careful saying this on YouTube, the same people who are all about the jabs, they want 13, 14 of them. There's going to be people who are all on board with, the enslavement doctrine of the day, but hopefully it'll wake up some people. This is why I say that I think the Jews and the Christians need each other right now. There's a union that needs to come to place, because technically we both serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel.
By combining their forces, they become a trading bloc onto themselves. This is an age of nuclear weapons. You don't want to go to war against each other. But this is also an age of collapse. So as long as you're able to stay coherent, as long as you're able to defend your borders, then you'll come out ahead, okay? So that's the idea of moving towards war, because war has a power to unify the imagination and the beliefs of the people in your nation, right? So you're using war in order to increase the nationalism, the religion of your society, which will allow you to weather the storm better, okay? So that is the grand vision of Alexander Dugin. And in my opinion, he is absolutely correct. And Russia is moving towards this by invading Ukraine, all right? So the Ukraine invasion was not a response to NATO. The Ukraine invasion was to implement this grand vision for the creation of the Third Rome, to allow Russia to survive the coming collapse of the global order better than anyone else, okay? And so by taking over Ukraine, you now control 1/3 of the world's carbohydrates and a lot of the world's energy, right? And once you control Ukraine and the Black Sea, you are now able to export your energy and your food to Africa, to the Middle East, to Europe, to Asia, okay? So that's the grand vision for Russia. And again, in my opinion, this makes a lot of sense. The world is collapsing, and so you have to build a fortress. You have to be self-sufficient in order to weather the storm. So given this, America's like, well, we can do the same thing, okay? And so the grand plan for America is something called the Technate, okay? Sorry. This is something we'll discuss more later on, okay? But first I want to introduce this idea to you, the Technate. And the Technate is very simple. It's the idea that, you know what? Yes, the world is going into chaos. The world is collapsing. But North America is self-sufficient, right? So these past few months, Donald Trump has picking a fight with Denmark over Greenland, right? He's been threatening Canada. He's been threatening Mexico. He's been threatening Colombia. He's taking over Venezuela. He's been threatening Cuba. He's been threatening Honduras, Nicaragua. Why is he doing this? Because they're all part of the grand vision for Greater North America. Okay, what Peter Hegseth calls Greater North America. The Technate. All right? And this is a response to Moscow's Third Rome. If Moscow is going to build this grand alliance in order to weather the storm, then America has no choice but to also build this grand alliance as well in order to protect itself in this coming storm. All right? So what Donald Trump has recognized is that Putin is right. The world is collapsing. There's nothing we can do to save the world. So let's just accelerate it in a way that allows America to benefit from this collapse. Okay? So by collapsing the GCC, by collapsing the Middle East, you make Asia and Europe now dependent on North American energy and fertilizer exports. And this allows you the resources, the motivation to create the technate, okay? This self-sufficient economy, okay? Does it make sense? All right, okay. All right. So let us summarize, okay? So in September 11th, 1991, George H.W. Bush, he responds to the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of Soviet Union, by coining a new phrase called the New World Order. And there are three major pillars to the idea of the New World Order, okay? The first idea is that America will become the financial capital of the world. America will offshore resources and manufacturing to other places. And then America will focus primarily on finance, making Wall Street the center of the world, okay? The other idea is the idea of secular multiculturalism. So the world is divided, but what can unite everyone is the love of money, the love of consumerism. So if we just focus on making money and buying things, then the world will be forever at peace. Okay? And so we have to let go of borders. We have to let go of community. We have to let go of identity and focus more on consumerism. Okay? And the last idea is global domination, where in order for global trade to happen, America will provide security for all. No one has to fight it anymore because America will guarantee global peace. If anyone rises to challenge this order, Pax Americana, then America will go destroy it.
Pax Americana.
Okay? So these are the three main pillars of the New World Order as announced by George H.W. Bush on September 11th, 1991. Okay? Trump World Order is a response to this New World Order. Basically, what Trump is saying, and what he's been saying for a long time is, why should America pay for the defense of other nations? Why should America have to be the consumer of last resort for everyone? Why are Americans paying for everything so that Europeans can have their welfare and their pension? Everyone's taking advantage of America, and it's destroying America. So let us change the New World Order to the Trump World Order, okay? And how do you do that? Well, you move America from a focus on finance to a focus on resources and manufacturing, okay? Basically, you believe the world is going to permanent war, and so you provide the resources and the manufacturing in order to facilitate this world war. Meanwhile, America has become Fortress of America. It can hide behind its fortress, continental fortress, and it's protected by two oceans, right? Okay? So this makes sense. Multiculturalism doesn't work. It leads to stupidity such as DEI, woke politics, transgenderism. It's all retarded. Let's focus on what makes us proud to be Americans, which is Christian nationalism, okay? Our love of the white race.
I don't know, Mark. This guy's kind of growing on me. At the beginning, I was with you. I wasn't so sure about him, but I don't know. He's growing on me.
Our nation and God. Okay? So no more of this multiculturalism. No more immigration. No more open borders. No more Democratic Party. Let's just focus on being Christian nationalists. Okay? Love the United States, love of Christianity, love of the white race. And the last idea is, why should America pay to protect the world? Screw Pax Americana. Let's just do MAGA, okay? What is MAGA? MAGA is national rejuvenation. Let's make America great again by rebuilding America's manufacturing industry, by exploiting the infinite resources that God has given America in order to make sure every American has a decent life, okay?
I don't know, man. This is fitting right in with Revelation 13. I don't know. I'm getting serious Revelation 13 vibes, aren't you? Read about the beast from the earth. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon, and exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. America. Maybe. I don't know. Like, if America is looking to expand into Canada and Greenland and Mexico, and, then the other side, you've got Putin, and causes the earth and all those to dwell to worship the first beasts, whose deadly wound was healed. Well, if that's causing... So one theory of the head wound, because Trump keeps saying that America was dead under the Biden administration, and now it's the wonder of the whole world. That kind of fits. Then I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear. His mouth, the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, his great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it was mortally wounded. That could have been the United States under the Biden administration, because the United States almost collapsed. And his deadly wound was healed. That could be the Trump administration. And all the world marveled and followed the beasts. That seems to be what's happening right now. United States, the whole world seems to be following the lead of MAGA. So they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beasts, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him. Beast here has a negative connotation. Beasts scripturally typically means nation, right? And I saw the sound of beast rising up. So nation, or a system of government, is probably a better way of saying it. So who is like the system of government, who is able to make war with him. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. I don't know. I mean, it's possible that Trump gets to a point where he starts to blaspheme or blaspheme God, if you want to point your finger at Trump. I'm still of the opinion that Trump is likely anointed, likely one of the 2 witnesses, and that this is in reference probably more to, someone else who blasphemes God. Or this could be, and he was speaking of who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him. This could apply to the nation. Blaspheme against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and overcome them. I don't know if that's happening right now. And authority was given to him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. I mean, there is definitely a war against Christians. It's not from Trump, though. It's other nations, other areas, places like South Africa, which are, saying death to the white man, and then in other places where there's a strong Islamic uprising. I don't know. We've looked at this before, and there's definitely potential flaws with the United States being the head wound. The traditional teaching is that it's the Antichrist, which we don't buy. I don't buy here. I don't buy that it's the Antichrist. That is so 10 years ago. I did a video defending that narrative. If it's any consolation, I used to believe that narrative until I started actually reading the scripture in that regard. When you actually study about that Antichrist, it has not. Yeah, this is not the Antichrist. You got to keep this clear, because this is clearly talking about movements of nations, governments, things like the G7, NATO, stuff like that. If anyone has, let's see. And all authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation, all who dwell on the earth. It's possible that whoever rises up against Trump, this could be the one who takes his place. Then you would be looking at somebody like the little horn, to where if you have some figure that, finally when they rise up and take out the 2 witnesses, they could take the place of Trump, then you could get somebody blaspheming God. I don't see God. I don't see Donald Trump blaspheming God right now. The closest thing I honestly, I can't even think of anything. I was going to say that picture he tweeted. He didn't even, he immediately took it down. So he knew that it had a bad look. And he said that, he thought it was supporting the Red Cross. Obviously, he did not generate that image. Somebody else in his staff must have generated the image, showed him, and then he thought it was good and retweeted it. I don't see him playing with AI generators to make these kind of images. But he described that image as, he thought that it was supporting the Red Cross. He thought it was him as a doctor. I mean, that's the closest thing that even comes close to, like, if you were like going to start getting ahead about yourself being somebody like deity, like, you know what I mean? Because it did have him with glowing hands. But the fact that he immediately retracted it when he found out the impression that it was having, yeah, I don't know. So this has got to be somebody else. I can't see this being Trump right now. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted him to make war with the saints. This could be Islam. I mean, this could be assigning, like personhood to something like Islam. To blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints, to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear to hear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's patience and faith of the saints. No kidding. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. I don't know. This kind of indicates that first beast is still around. So maybe it's something like the G7 still exists, but this rising beast, like this could be MAGA. Like this could be like that new America that he's doing the game theory about, America, Canada, Greenland, Mexico, Cuba, Venezuela, South America. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon, and exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded. This could be Project Stargate. To make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword, like if you were going to do like an AI that represented the government. I don't know. And lived and was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Seems like this will be obvious when it happens. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. I don't know. I kind of get vibes like that listening to this version of game theory. Anytime you hear a restructuring, New World Order, that kind of thing.
All right. So again, I understand Trump is an idiot. Trump has launched America into this stupid war in the Middle East. Trump has pissed off NATO. Trump has pissed off all of America's allies. So he's a retard. But if the goal was to destroy the American empire, destroy the global economy, and rebuild America for the benefit of Americans, then Trump is a genius. And he may go down in history as America's greatest president. Okay? All right. Any questions? Yep.
All right, we'll leave it there. I don't know. The guy's kind of growing on me. I guess we'll find out. Time will tell if Game Theory 18 has any legs. I don't know. But anytime you see a restructuring of the world, you got to think about the different beasts. The persecution of the saints is definitely happening. There's a scenario where, the United States did seem as though it was dead, a dead country. Trump likes to point that out from time to time. We were dead, and now we're alive. In the wonder of the whole world. We're an economic powerhouse. So the elements are there to see. I'm still kind of trying to figure out how everything fits. Feels like we're still missing some really key pieces of the puzzle. Or I'm just completely blinded. Maybe Trump is this terrible person that people are making him out to be. Maybe he is a retard. Maybe he is persecuting the saints. Maybe he is blaspheming God's name. I don't really see it when he puts out messages thanking the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Kind of hard to think that Trump is blaspheming God when he makes those kind of comments and videos and stuff like that. So I don't know. Hard to say. Well, I think that's probably good for the night. If you hadn't heard about that Game Theory 18, that's kind of making the viral rounds. I've noticed several people talking about it. They're very interested in the restructuring that could result from what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. So, alrighty. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this content, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to get notifications. We're here Monday through Friday at 4:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. God bless you. Shalom, shalom.